ladies and gentlemen, and especially the survivors and their families who are with us here tonight. This week, my wife Rhoda and I joined Phyllis and Richard Heidemann on a remarkable March of the Living journey. Our guide has been their extraordinary daughter, Dr. Alana Heidemann, whose knowledge of the Holocaust is matched only by her passion to educate others about it. On Monday, we walked through endless rows of graves at the Jewish cemetery in Warsaw, where some 200,000 tombstones bear witness to our people's 8-century-long history in this land. We visited the site of Janusz Korczak's orphanage and learned about the courage and dignity of this incredible man who refused to abandon the children to save his own life, choosing instead to die alongside them in the gas chambers. We sat at the Umschlagplatz, the square where over 300,000 of Warsaw's Jews spent their final hours before being shipped off to the death camps. And we stood atop Mila 18, where the brave fighters of the Warsaw Ghetto made their final stand against the Nazis, defying an indifferent world with 3 powerful words: we are here. Yesterday, we visited a beautiful, centuries-old synagogue in the village of Tikochin and went into the nearby forest to stand by the pits where the town's 2,800 Jews were murdered by the Einsatzgruppen. Then we went to Treblinka and walked in a field where thousands of stones marked the site where some 900,000 Jews were once gassed to death. This morning, we went to Majdanek, the labor and extermination camp that stood intact at the end of the war. We saw the gas chambers, the barrack filled with shoes, and the enormous mound of ash outside the crematoria. And tonight, we join you in this magnificent hall in Krakow for this moving program on the night of Yom HaShoah, when tomorrow we will march together to Auschwitz. Ladies and gentlemen, for me, this March of the Living has been a march of memory, a march of defiance, and a march of hope. It has been a march to remember our people's dispossession, deprivation, and desperation, to remember the individuals behind the statistics and the faces behind the numbers, the mothers and fathers whose families were wiped out, the sisters and brothers separated from their loved ones forever, the boys and girls, toddlers and infants who never had a chance to grow up. It has been a march to remember that the Holocaust was not perpetrated by aliens on another planet, but by real people in the real world. It has been a march to remember the most important lesson of the Holocaust, that the Jewish people must never be powerless against our enemies or rely on others to defend us. And it has been a march to remember the uniqueness of the Holocaust. Ladies and gentlemen, the scale of the Holocaust is hard to fathom. Tomorrow, as we march 13,000 strong, consider this: more than 3 times that many Jews were killed in a single day in Majdanek in November 1943. And more Jews than that were killed nearly every day in Auschwitz in May 1944. And if 6 million is a hard number to wrap your mind around, consider this as well. In 30 years, nearly 300,000 people have been on March of the Living, an average of some 10,000 a year, which is a remarkable number by any measure. Yet even at that pace, it would take the March of the Living 600 years to bring a single marcher for every Jew murdered in the Holocaust. But it is not the scale of the Holocaust that differentiates it from the genocides, mass murders, and other man-made horrors that stain human history. Scale is only a difference in size, not a difference in kind. What makes the Holocaust unique is that all Jews were targeted for annihilation, that this diabolical crime was systematically planned and methodically executed, and that the Holocaust was not merely a means to an end, but an end in itself. And what is unique about the Holocaust is also the unique hatred that fueled it. For centuries in Europe, Jew hatred was a powder keg waiting to explode. It exploded in the Rhineland during the Crusades, and in Basel, Mainz, and elsewhere during the Black Plague. It exploded in 15th century Spain during the Inquisition, and in 17th century Ukraine under Khmelnytsky. It exploded through the pens of great intellectuals like Voltaire and Ezra Pound, and through the clubs and pitchforks of murderous mobs that always hung like a Damocles sword above the heads of Jewish communities in ghettos and shtetls across Europe. And it exploded in the Dreyfus trial in Paris, convincing a young Theodor Herzl, a half-century before the Holocaust, that this hatred demanded that the Jewish people establish a Jewish state. In this march of memory, we must remember that the Holocaust is not merely another chapter in the story of man's inhumanity to man. The Holocaust is the worst chapter in the story of man's inhumanity to Jews. That story is a story of a hatred so old and ubiquitous that it has transcended time and space, and so malleable that it has afflicted so many different cultures and civilizations and been adopted by so many disparate ideologies and identities. What makes the long night of the Holocaust so different than so many other nights of Jew hatred is that during the Holocaust, a would-be master race was executing a master plan that harnessed that age-old hatred to a modern industrial killing machine. And during that long, dark night, the Jewish people were utterly powerless. For many, Auschwitz is the ultimate symbol of evil. But for me, it is more than that. It is also the ultimate symbol of Jewish powerlessness. Ladies and gentlemen, this March of the Living has been a march of defiance for me as well. It has been a chance to defy with each and every step the Nazis who sought to exterminate our people, a chance to defiantly declare what those brave Jewish fighters in Warsaw defiantly declared 75 years ago. We are here. It has been a chance to defy all the Nazis' willing executioners throughout Europe who eagerly joined in the bloodlust. The Nazis did not perpetrate their crimes alone. Thousands were needed to man the machinery of mass death. Thousands enthusiastically took up the task. And ladies and gentlemen, this year's march is also a chance to defy a law that should never have been passed, a law which brings shame to a proud nation that can take pride in so much of its conduct during World War II. The Polish government, unlike other occupied governments in Europe, did not collaborate with the Nazis. The Polish resistance fought the Nazis with great courage and fierce determination. And the Polish people can proudly boast of having more righteous among the nations than any other people. Given this record, the Polish state today is right to be upset with those who either through malice or ignorance mistakenly hold Poland collectively responsible for the crimes of the Nazis. The Polish state is right to be upset not only because this is libelous, but because the Polish people themselves suffered terribly during World War II. Millions of Poles were victims of the German war machine. But this law is not the answer. Burying the truth is never the answer. And this law will not silence a Jewish people that refuses to be silenced again. This law will not prevent us from speaking of Jedwabne or Kielce. It will not prevent us from speaking of those who hunted hidden Jews or who turned in their neighbors. This law will not prevent us from exposing the crimes of individual Poles who are responsible for murdering Jews during the Holocaust. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a guest in this country, a guest that deeply values the friendship today between Israel and Poland. I know how important that friendship is to the security and prosperity of both our countries. But I am also privileged to serve as an ambassador of Israel. I am privileged to represent a Jewish people that is once again a sovereign people. Sovereignty has given us many things. It has given us a shield. No longer do the Jewish people beg foreign kings, prime ministers, and presidents to defend us. Today, the Jewish people defend ourselves. Sovereignty has given us a refuge. No longer do we depend on foreign governments to open their gates to welcome in Jews fleeing persecution. Today, we open our own gates and welcome Jews home to Israel from across the world. And sovereignty has also given us a voice. No longer do we ask others to plead our case before the sovereign nations of the world. Today, we plead our own case and have a place among the nations. But with the privilege of sovereignty comes the responsibility of sovereignty, the responsibility to raise that shield, maintain that refuge, and use that voice. No power on earth will silence that voice. Israel will speak the truth at the United Nations. Israel will speak the truth in the American Congress. And Israel will speak the truth right here in Poland, especially for those who can no longer speak the truth, those whose voices were silenced long ago. Ladies and gentlemen, it is precisely because the Jewish people are a sovereign nation that for me, this March of the Living has also been a march of hope. This week, that hope has followed us everywhere. I heard it in the songs of Jewish students in that synagogue in Tikochin. I read it in the words inscribed by Israeli soldiers on a stone monument that stands by those mass graves in the forest nearby. I saw it in the Israeli flags carried at Treblinka and wrapped around shoulders in Majdanek. And I felt that hope this whole week because I know that the Jewish people do not march here in Poland as a stateless, powerless, and downtrodden people. We march as a sovereign, powerful, and proud people. I expect that sense of hope will feel even stronger tomorrow as 13,000 of us march in Auschwitz and sing the Hatikva together. As we sing our national anthem of hope, I will remember the 6 million Jews who were murdered, the 1.5 million Jewish children. I will feel a defiant pride, knowing that the 1,000-year Reich that tried to uproot the tree of our people is no more, and that tree has been replanted in its ancient soil, where it grows taller and stronger, decade after decade, reaching greater and greater heights in technology and innovation, science and medicine, culture and learning. And I will feel the hope that comes from knowing that the Jewish people are no longer spectators of history, but actors in history. I will feel the hope that comes from believing that as we act to secure the Jewish future, a part of each of those 6 million comes alive in us as their personal stories become part of our national story. A national story that contains many difficult chapters, but which is a great story of promise and hope, a story of an eternal people whose glorious chapters are still being written. Yehi Zichram Baruch. May their memory be blessed.